So Irfan is a registered social worker, assistant director for Children's Social Services. Irfan spent the last 15 years working within child protection services as a social worker, manager and now a leader. He has first-hand experience of what it's like to work within a department that is the most scrutinised and regulated environment. Today Irfan will share with you a small glimpse of what child protection social work is all about. With his speech titled, "Damned if they do, damned if they don't, child protection social workers." It's Irfan, everybody!
Wow, you're actually all still here. Usually at the point of being introduced as a child protection social worker, most people run as fast as they can, holding on to their children, and I can see some children have disappeared. Usually on the way out they're shouting, "Child snatcher." I've heard a lot worse, but child snatcher is probably just appropriate for this setting. My response usually is, no thanks, keep your child. Generally, people really struggle to understand what child protection social work is about, and I totally get why. The roles and responsibilities of a child protection social worker are so vast that it's virtually impossible to explain exactly what it is that we do, and more to the point, how we do it. As is the case with most South Asian parents, it would have been a lot easier for my parents if I'd have just chosen a profession like being a doctor, an engineer, or a lawyer. So you can imagine their distress and their dismay when I said, "Actually folks, I want to be a child protection social worker." They couldn't quite grasp it. On a more serious note though, there is a myth out there, and that myth has always been around, which is social workers just tip up and they remove children because we can just do that apparently. That couldn't be further away from the truth though. But as I said earlier, I'm not going to have time reading that right now to go into the ins and outs of what a social worker does. So in true leadership fashion, I'm going to talk you through some facts and figures. It's always a good cop-out and a safe place when you're feeling a bit nervous. So for the year ending March 2018, children's services across England received 656,000 referrals. I'll just take a moment for that to sink in. 656,000 referrals. That was up until March 2018 for the whole year. Of those 656,000 referrals, 407,000 children were put on a child in need plan. So those were children that were considered to be in need of support in order to remain home safely. Additionally, 51,000 of those children were made subject to a child protection plan last year. The legal test to place a child in a child protection plan is fairly simple, and that is that the child has suffered or is likely to suffer significant harm. So there you have it. Clear myth buster straight away. That's 458,000 children who were supported to remain at home safely, despite the general myth that we just tip up and remove children. So you may well wonder, what are these risks? What's he talking about? What risks do social workers manage? Up until the end of last financial year, the assessments that were conducted identified the following themes: alcohol and drug misuse, domestic violence, mental ill health, child sexual exploitation, child criminal exploitation, child trafficking, that's a fairly new phenomenon, children involved in gangs, neglect, children suffering emotional harm, children who experience physical and sexual abuse, children who are victims of FGM, and last but not least, children who've been victims of faith-based abuse. Having set this context, you might be wondering, well, why on earth would you want to be a social worker? I mean, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, and that truly is the case. But despite assessing those levels of risk within an environment which actually is fairly hostile towards social workers, being a social worker is an absolute honour, it's an absolute privilege, because you get to change lives and you get to have a massive impact on children and families who you can keep together at home safely, despite the levels of risks that are in place. There isn't any other profession that can do that in England, just a social worker. But we're operating in a space where we're functioning with a vacancy factor of around 25%. So that's 25% of social work posts which permanently remain vacant. So despite all the myths, my plea to you all would be, if you're looking for a change of profession and you like excitement, you like managing risk, come and talk to me. We'll give you a job in social work. Thank you.